Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt, and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on the 22nd of April 2018. I have a resident groundhog I haven't seen since last fall, and he made an appearance yesterday. Came out of his hole, lives out the back, and wandered to his usual spot on a ridge and looked over the field and did a bit of thinking, of course, and looked at it. He was in the snow, of course. There's still a lot of snow on the ground in the field and so on. And on the ridge, he pervaded his domain, basically, and had a little think. And he reappeared today. It was a bit warmer today in the sun. So at last, thank goodness, at last, maybe it's starting to turn into, I don't know if we'll even get a spring. It might go right into summer. I don't know. Folk have no idea how routine weather control is today, and it is routine on a massive scale. Not guessing about it either. You can read their own publications from the universities of what they'd like to do and what they have been doing in pretended experimental phases, as you say, testing it out here and there, when they've been doing it steadily since 1998, at least in Canada. It's routine, including the old harp technologies, which in the interviews were done in the 90s with the spokespeople for harp in the US military and the Air Force, I think it was too, admitted that they could quite easily, with the standing waves, alter the patterns of the Earth's natural air streams, the jet streams in the air, and the different trade winds, etc. And they could even bring them right down to the ground level if they wanted to, which didn't really generally happen in nature. It's really old technology, but it's used on a routine scale today. We are living in a cocoon, aren't we? A cocoon of make-believe, in a sense. A form, and it is true. It's just, people don't realize your culture, whatever culture you're in at that moment, and everything you think about as part of your culture is incredibly carefully thought out for you, with massive panels, sometimes international panels, who decide how to, see, they don't have to create the new culture, they morph you into it step by step in little phases of it, through entertainment and through education at school and so on. And whatever you really want to know is going to be happening in 20 years' time, you just look at what the children are getting in their first year at school. And that will tell you how the culture is to be back, it will come 20 years' time or 25 years' time, step by step. That's always how it's done. And it's not a new thing, as I've mentioned before. The Comintern did it. They give lectures on it back in the 1930s, how they did it. But now it's even more perfect in a sense, because you have worldwide standardized education along the same lines. Most folk don't know. And it's true, I understand it. Believe you me, we all go through, we're born into a system. There's no one to stand and say, hey, look, I give you a little shake. This is how it really works. And give you a really intensive crash course on reality. You don't get that when you're a child. And it's a shame, and most of it is because most adults don't know either. They've morphed into the creature they were intended to be by the system and the culture, the propaganda, the indoctrination. It's very clever and very, very, very effective indeed. And I've always said, natural tendencies are used against you, and natural acceptances of tribal systems, regardless if you're in a multicultural system or not, it makes no difference. You still have this natural tendency to think authority must be there to take care of you. It's very, very paternal, even maternal too, and how you perceive it. And as I say, in a small tribe, you could see quite easily if a chief got out of hand and got too uppity for his status and so on, or if he wanted to continue his own domain as in a family tree like royalty or whatever, in a system perhaps where the tribe decided who was going to be chief for a period, they simply got rid of him, kicked him out, did whatever it took to get him out. But when you have a so-called civilized system, which is capitalistic, run on money, it doesn't matter. If you run on money, I don't care if it's capitalist or communistic, you still run on money. You really are. These are your little tokens, your little seed, you see. And that's how you're ruled. So once you have money in any form, you can hire, in a system where that's the norm, you can hire armies to take care of the chief, and the chief will be protected for as long as he ever wants to be, and his children too. That's the problem. So natural tendency of trust, because your elders in a small tribe would naturally elect someone they trusted, who is real, and not a propaganda expert like we have today. And you would trust them to take care of your own best interests. Today we don't have that at all. Today government and what they call governance is so remote from your reality, from your personal reality. Most folk don't even know it exists. They really think that somehow that this antiquated nonsense of a party system, this tripe, and that's what it is tripe, is there to take care of them in the way that they are right now, and it'll always be that way. Even when it's changing, and they can't grasp why it's changing, they still go along and vote the same way as always. It's too easy to, because it's really meant to hit the very primitive person, and the primitive part in everybody too. We're big brother, we're daddy, and we'll take care of your needs. We'll get you jobs, we'll take care of your health, we'll make sure your children have schooling and that kind of thing, and welfare, all the things that in modern society. And that's why Quigley said back in the 60s, Carl Quigley that is, in his own book Tragedy and Hope, that eventually the parties would all be the same at election time, promising the same things. And therefore it's more of a competition of who can promise the most of the same things, depending on the good public relations experts they hire, the big corporations that they hire, big, and they are big corporations, some of these advertising executives, to promote them, then that's generally who you'll vote for. Very simple, very, very simple. But it's managed that way. It wouldn't matter either if the other group were in, because really, for those who rule the world, it's the overall strategy that's important. There's always winners and losers to an extent for temporary periods where they're in power, this party or that party's in power. But as long as whatever party's in must obey and go along with the big plan, which they never mention during elections, which really is the end of your sovereign nation state, as a state. Politicians will lie, especially the ones who are involved in this. They'll lie their teeth off to you, if they still have teeth. And they'll tell you, oh yeah, you still have all these rights and you're still a nation and so on. But meanwhile, you don't. Anything that really, really matters, you're not told about it, to start with. For instance, Canada is a good example, and so is the States and Britain and every other country. But were examples of a supra-governmental system. They call it governance, of massive boards of appointees who are generally ex-politicians, who make the career of feeding off the taxpayer. And because they're good at feeding off the taxpayer, they're ideal for taking more tax money to get the big agendas through across the globe, the massive changing face of the world. And they're very, very secretive. They'll publish little PR pieces that sound almost like wonderful charitable works that they do, but in reality it's much bigger than that. Much bigger than that. We're all little peons across the planet. Doesn't matter what country you're in. And today, starting from the old organisation which they used to have, based in Britain, that was the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and then now they have the European Group for International Affairs. It's the same body of people based in London, or the headquarters. And they have one for the Far Eastern Group as well, Pacific region, the Institute for Pacific Relations. It's the same group. So everywhere for the groups of nations, they have a different name for the same bunch that run it all. Planned and set up a lot before you were even born, and often before your dads were born. Very old. And they set up the IMF and the World Bank and the Bank for International Settlements. They set them all up. And they even said, in Quigley, he was a member of it. And Quigley said himself that eventually everything will be run by, across the whole planet, by the World Bank, the IMF, and the Bank for International Settlements would be the big controller of financing across the world. And it will even fix, which it does, of course, they fix the rates of currencies in every country. And the whole plan eventually, down the road, will be, who knows when, but down the road they want a single currency. Now they're going to digitalization. It's almost there. Because it really doesn't matter eventually what you call your currency in your own little area. But you have no idea. And now the big foundations are a part of it too, because the Royal Institute for International Affairs, they work with the big foundations, that their members set up the big foundations, I should say, which run thousands of NGO groups. And as long as the tops of NGOs are bought and paid for, the followers fall for all the do-gooding stuff that they're supposed to do. I mentioned it before, it's almost like that if you understand, and I hate even going into this term, using this term, this Illuminati term, but you got to understand what, for instance, Cecil Rhodes said in his will. Now, Cecil Rhodes was also a member of this international group to standardize a system across the whole planet. A lot of them were front men too. Even organizations to an extent have always been fronts for something else. But Rhodes himself, who was in partnership in this idea with the Royal Institute for International Affairs, or the Lord Alfred Milner Group as it was called then, and also he was his partner in his own group was Lord Rothschild of London. And he talks about it in his will, how he left most of the stuff to Rothschild to take over, and I guess to hand out to other groups and so on, to make sure the agenda continues. He mentioned too had to be run on a form of a secret society, similar to the Jesuits. Now, don't jump and, oh my God, here we go, it's the Jesuits, blah, 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 or it's the Catholics, blah, blah. No, it's not. He says like that. Remember too, getting back to Illuminati, that Weishaupt understood the Jesuit technique, since he worked at a Jesuit university. And he understood the technique of confession. Because when you're treating someone to be a Jesuit, and it's a great education for the people who become, or they used to be in a way, Jesuits. They picked very bright people, very devoted people. They'll go across the world and often get slaughtered in different tribal situations across the planet, in Latin America and different parts of Africa and so on. And sometimes they were so well respected, they could get into countries over time and be allowed to stay there where no one else would if they were foreigners, like Japan. And to train people like that, to get them so dedicated, you had to, the whole idea was to find their weaknesses. So the masters would find the weaknesses, the human weakness a person will have. And they would do it through confession of what they were terrified of, what they were liable to give into, as they call a sin. They would give into something and do something they shouldn't do. And the idea being to find out where their weak spots were and then stop the weak spots from dominating their life or destroying them. So give them abilities and techniques to overcome these weaknesses. Now remember too, that these guys would have to go into incredible situations in a time when there were often no roads into a lot of these places they're going into, and heavy jungles and disease, etc. Where most folk would just give up. These people would keep going. That's an incredible strength, and that's why many organizations afterwards copied that technique of training people to be so incredibly strong and persevering through thick and thin under circumstances that would crush most people. And as I say, they did find out weaknesses in each person to try and strengthen them, to stop that weakness being a chink in to the destruction of them during these hard times and hard tests. And Weishaupt, of course, he took the same kind of idea. As I say, everyone knew how effective this organization was, and Weishaupt took the idea and realized that he could get people who are really keen and of goodwill, youngsters especially, train them in that technique as well, and get the confession out of them to find their weak spots. And then, here's the key, appoint someone like a confessor to them in his own organization to be the mentor, very similar to the Jesuit. But now they had all of the weaknesses of that person. And rather than strengthen them against their weaknesses, they could actually exploit those weaknesses and use the people. And when they became agents, in a sense, to infiltrate societies, organizations, existing organizations. They would still believe they're doing good work to bring a world of peace or uniting a world together. Does it sound familiar? And they would infiltrate existing organizations, like Freemasonry, for instance. It was wide open for that. Many organizations went into Freemasonry to do the same kind of thing, but Weishaupt's organization did it to a really the nth degree. And he also could infiltrate the churches and so on, and get people of goodwill by using their terminology, their outlook, and why they existed, appearing to copy it. It's like a mirror image in a sense, so you couldn't really tell it apart, except he would start to introduce little changes here and there and use them to work to his own ends, to build his own empire. But his agents were very good too, and they really believed they were going to work for a world of peace, and as I said in Freemasonry, and still say it, which is again an awful lie, but the International Brotherhood of Man, they could bring it to be, regardless of circumstances and situations. Weishaupt himself realized that he could do this so slickly. In fact, he even boasted about his confidence at the top. He boasted how he brought in bishops even, and high religious people, whom he convinced that by explaining the deeper meanings of their own religion, that you could make them better Christians. And he laughed and mocked them for doing that behind their backs. So again, you can use people by using very, very well-tried techniques, not by appearing to abuse the people who you're training, but actually making them think they're doing a justice cause. The communists use the same technique with the young guys to be agents, and they were absolutely devoted, and they believed in what they were up to, never realizing they're being used again by a similar group, if not the same group. It's very, very effective, very effective. And it's very ancient too. Before they came along with Weishaupt, that technique was understood before in ancient times as well. But Weishaupt talked about it, how he did it, and how the fools, psychopaths love to brag, and he boasted about how the fools who followed him blindly and sheepishly and slavishly, they would actually almost grovel to him as like he was a god himself, and never realized he was using them. Because the intention, here's the key, where they were being led to, with all their good goals and so on, was not where he was taking them at all. But they had to believe that they were going along that path. He had other directions in mind about it all. So you can use people, use those intentions, use them all to get what you want, and they'll be the last ones to figure out they've all been used. Most of them won't ever figure out they've been used. And that is exactly what I'm talking about now with the Royal Institute for International Affairs, which is the CFR at the same time. There's many different branches and names of all the same organizations. The higher group, of course, they pulled people out of it, was the Trilateral Commission. Remember, this is all private. This is unelected by the public. This is private. And they advise every government, in fact they run every government across the planet that they call civilized. In other words, the countries where they've introduced the same system and central banking and borrowing from the World Bank and the IMF to get the money back, and the Bank for International Settlements, etc., etc., and all the massive bureaucracies, which they are, that govern the people and are completely unelected by the people. And most folk never know this. They don't know. Because there's no one to tell them of how it really works. You're not supposed to. Can you imagine if enough people who all knew what was going on, at least this basic stuff I'm talking about here, this is the basic stuff I'm telling you here at the moment. If there's enough people to even know that, how it would make their job a lot more difficult, saying, my goodness, look at all the people who are watching what we're up to, all the different groups out there. They're all connected like a massive worldwide, literally, web. And that, the web itself, the www, was no coincidence either. But instead, you're given trivia to obsess over. Your natural little fears. Oh, they're going to crash the economies again. Oh, inflation has gone up in Canada twice in 2 months, 2-3 months. And the government's given permission for all the, like they said over the last few years ago, that is, that constantly now, all the energy prices can go up and up and up and up. Isn't it interesting too, all the big boys who are so wonderful with their charitable work after being in politics, who belong to these organizations and work for them. Isn't it wonderful how they've all got massive investments in every project across the world, which they use their tax money to fund and get going? Huh? Isn't that just... You understand what I'm saying? You're looking at the same thing as Weishaupt, because that's what he had in mind. It's like the old idea of Sherlock Holmes with Moriarty, his arch enemy, a genius, who could get people to do whatever he wanted to, and the folk who did it could never figure out to the end that they'll be used. Same kind of thing. Same kind of darn thing. So don't look at these people with their titles when they call the Right Honourable so-and-so, yada yada yada. Don't think they're somehow superior or more holier than thou, because they're not. Far from it. The most successful crime syndicates are the officially acknowledged ones. They give themselves beautiful titles. They get everybody bowing and scraping to them. They plundered the planet with your money, off of you. Remember part of the idea that they couldn't tax people off your income for centuries, supposedly. And they did it during World War I in the UK and other countries too. It's a temporary war tax. And being the good, honest people they are, of course, they wouldn't lie to you. And the temporary part of it gradually just disappeared. And that's what happened. US did the same thing. A victory tax. Victory for who, eh? And that's how it's done. To rule the world, master the world, and always feed rivers and rivers of propaganda to the public, how wonderful these organizations which they run all are, and how they're doing the good, and they're there to do good. Don't forget that the reason they couldn't tax you before, and they used the wars for an excuse for your income, was because if they tax your labor, that was a form of slavery. That was completely understood and debated in the 1700s and 1800s. Amazing how we can just forget it. Well, they're doing good things with it, apart from lining their own pockets and having tremendous wages and flying around in jets, which we all pay for, as they take your rights and your sovereignty away from everybody, and they flood countries across the world into a massive mix, which they know is going to cause tremendous, even from the experience they've got already, but they knew before they started it caused tremendous problems and strain in welfare systems and so on. They won't live amongst you. Of course they won't. They never have. And they won't be driving amongst you or walking in the streets with you either. There's other plans that they got in mind. But the fact, what I'm getting you to is, most of what governs your life is done by those who aren't even elected through your governmental systems. So, getting back to voting, it doesn't matter who you vote for, as Quigley said. He was the historian for the American branch, as Council on Foreign Relations. And the reason he was a historian too was because he took it over from Alfred Zimmern, who was a communist. And as he said himself, we, as an organization, are often mistaken. They're thinking about the charitable, so-called we're doing good all the time, and as they plunder countries, make war in countries, and all the rest of it, and then pretend to help them out. Eh? But that's what Quigley said. He says we accept everybody dictators, he says, and right-wing, left-wing communists. We don't mind who they are. They're all sworn to one system. And it's imperative you have all this variety in it, because the trick of governing all peoples is to have front people for every type within society to follow. I mentioned it before, it's like walking into a massive clothing store. See a man or a woman, go into a man's store or a woman's store, and they go, for you, there's every kind of clothing that a man would wear. Every kind of suit, every kind of color, whatever your mind goes for, they got it already made for you. And that's what political parties and shades of political parties are all about. Same thing with all your protesting, and so it's all made for you. All made for you. It's better when it's made for you, because see, if you start making your own groups, roots, it's more work for them to take it over time, which they can do over time. They can put their own people in. And they'll be great volunteers. That was standard stuff with communists. They'll come in and volunteer we'll do that. Don't worry about that. We'll do all the paperwork for you. And you'll elevate this person that comes in and who works tirelessly until they do everything and do the books and blah, 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 until they're running the company, which is your organization or your charity group or whatever it happens to be. And then they swing it off into a different direction that was intended all along. That's what they do. But it does take them longer to do that. It's much better to have ready-made groups that you'll go, because you've got a flavour for this and a flavour for that. They've got it made for you already. And if they can make enough angst, I call it angst groups that are formed with beefs about this. Oh, I'm not happy about this. And shades of all kinds, including genders. Then they can use that angst against each other, in fact. They don't care about you if you're happy or not happy. They don't give a darn about you. Or if something is made legal, even, again, all kinds of forms of genders, or whatever. They don't care at the top. They laugh. It's like the old movies used to make from Greece. And they were pretty good movies, some of them. And if I'm dubbed into English, about the gods up in Mount Olympus, looking down on all the petty people. And they'd play with the people. And that was the key again. They played with the people. Oh, look at so-and-so. He likes this and she likes that. And they'd play with them and have little games with them. And the people would be prompted and nudged along this way and that way. And never ever know. They'd never know they're being used. The gods are sitting there watching, laughing their heads off. Laughing. It was great fun. Well, that's what those who rule the world look at. That's how they look upon us. And occasionally they have a nuisance problem. Someone who hasn't joined a group but is trying to start their own group that's not managed by them yet. And they have to divert a little bit of work towards you to get someone to get in there and gradually take it over. But as I say, most of the time, that's why you got all these ready-made groups. I can remember, for instance, through the 90s, you had, and just beyond it, you had the global meetings. You had some in Toronto. And there was a big stink at Toronto when you had one where they had areas of Toronto cordoned off. The public couldn't go for the massive meetings of all these special anointed people coming in. And the public were kept away from that. And it came out at the time, well, as long as this is going on, that because people were arguing, we can walk on this as public, as part of Canada, sovereign. Well, they said, we're not for this meeting, it's not. So in other words, here you have brute force telling you. Brute force, that's what it is. And the threat of brute force. They can make something non-sovereign for temporary, or I guess, if they can do it temporary, they can do it permanent. Because it's all in your head anyway, what a country is, isn't it? Isn't it? It's what they tell you it is. It's a corporation. But they can tell you can't go there, because at this moment, no, you don't have rights here at all. So stay off. And don't go down the alleyway or down that road or wherever until we say you can. That's what happened. The meetings for these globalist meetings, which are big fanfare thing, all they do is go, all the leaders from different countries and all their stragglers that are getting kickbacks and that for these freebies that they go to, and prostitutes too. They even had articles in the papers about the prostitute, all kinds, male and female, which we pay for. The British Columbia one, they actually came out at the time they said that it's their preferences, a lot of them, from different countries. It's just their culture and so on, so accept it. So you have to toss your laws out the window to accept another culture. Well, what does that tell you? What does that tell you about your culture? It means your culture is completely pliable, according to your boss's whims. Huh? How about that? But we pay for them all. And some of them are underage too, including males. So it's okay for them to break all laws, because your rulers are just like the gods up there, you see. And your rulers are not the ones you see as you elect. They're a bit minor, they're a bit down from the gods. But they're responsible to the gods that run the world. But you're not supposed to know all that. You're supposed to just see the thing, oh, isn't that terrible? And react to everything emotionally. That's what they want. Then it's easy to manage you. And that's why they have so many groups on the fringe of emotional breakdowns over different things at the moment.